I'm the Director of Music and Arts at Asylum Hill Congregational Church in Hartford, Connecticut.
You try to have three people on a Sunday morning to operate the live stream. Can you just walk me through how that works and how you're able to convey
Sure.
the vision?
Yeah, so the way our system is set up in the sanctuary, which we've had in place for 3 years, and we've been live streaming services for 3 years. So moving into the whole pandemic virtual only thing was not as big a leap for us.
Hmm.
Um, the only changes for us really were content. So what happens is there's a video closet that has controls for all three cameras in the sanctuary. The live stream software is on that computer, and we use OBS Studio.
Okay.
Um, then in the back of the sanctuary, there is another computer and a soundboard, and typically then the videos that are a part of the live stream, because we have it could be a scripture reading or any other portion of the service, including choir things, are pre-recorded, and
Right.
then those happen live in the in during the live stream. But those are played from that front of house computer in the back of the church, and the the video closet has a great little Roland switcher console that it can choose whatever feed. It can choose the one of the camera feeds. It can choose the computer feed from the back. So when a video is playing, it just chooses the computer feed, and suddenly that's what's on the live stream. Um,
And
the
do you
computer
stream to Facebook or YouTube or Zoom? How do you do
We
it?
use a streaming service. We
Okay.
use Dacast, DACAST.com, which is the same streaming service we've been using for 3 years. It's a subscription service.
Okay.
Um, it's probably, it's one of, kind of like with cell phones. It's like one of about 4 or 5 companies out there that are sort of the bigger live stream subscription services. It has really good video on demand backup in terms of anything we broadcast is recorded and saved on their website, and we can access it to, like, we then will access that and then upload it to YouTube, to the church YouTube channel after the fact.
Got it. Okay. So on Sunday morning, what platform are your congregants looking at to see the
There
service?
is a live stream link on the church website,
Mhm.
and they click on that link and it opens the live stream channel.
Oh, so it's directly like it's embedded in your
Yeah.
church website. Oh, ooh, interesting. Huh.
And on the live stream page on the church website, there is a live stream access link.
Hmm.
There is a PDF of that Sunday morning bulletin, and there is a link for a virtual sign in, kind of like a virtual pew
Yeah.
pad kind of
Guest
thing.
book. Right.
Because one of the things that we talked about early on was, yeah, we can look at the analytics of how many people are viewing the live stream,
Right.
but that doesn't tell you numbers of people. It tells you how many IP addresses were tuning in.
That's right.
um, and to try and capture, although not everyone signs in, as with anything, the longer it's there, the less people pay attention to it. So there are some people who still faithfully sign in every Sunday morning. Um, but yeah, that's the way the setup works. I am then standing in the center of the sanctuary in the middle aisle with a music stand and on a headset, communicating with those other two people. I have a microphone there, and we're all masked. I will sing along with the hymns. Um, Susan Carroll creates the visual melody and music for whatever hymns we're doing,
Hmm.
and that's all in a PowerPoint that I create that goes up on screen and then is part of the live stream while she's playing, so people can see and sing along. Any liturgy happens
Wow.
that way as well. So that PowerPoint I create every single week, usually on a Friday or Saturday, whenever I get the information from the clergy.
Wow. Are people able to? Because I've seen your stuff, but I've only viewed it on your YouTube channel. I didn't know that
Mhm.
it was also embedded in the website. Um, and I've seen these elaborate PowerPoints that you've done with the lyrics on screen and the melody and everything. I think that's amazing. I have put up all the lyrics for hymns, and I've recorded my little pandemic pod singing along with them and harmonies and stuff, and then spliced them together and EQ'd them and thrown reverb on and do like try to make it sound nicer. But I have not put scores up on screen. That is very cool. Do
Yeah.
you are there ways before I forget this question because I'm just interested because I haven't heard of Deckcast and this is really kind of cool. Are there ways for people to um, interact with the video while they're watching it, much like they would on YouTube and Facebook?
No,
Okay. So that all happens,
that's the only drawback.
right, the liking and the sharing and the commenting and stuff, that happens elsewhere. Got it.
Yeah. That
Got
usually happens after the fact when people go onto YouTube to view it. But I mean, the viewership is actually, honestly, our live stream viewership skyrocketed initially during the pandemic.
it. Right.
Um, where typically there was maybe up maximum 50 people who would be live streaming our services when they were live and in person, people were there.
Hmm.
Once everything went virtual, it was like 400 to 500 people watching the live stream initially. That tapered off during the summer, which would happen in person anyway. Um, and I would say during the fall, I mean, again, this is that sort of IP viewership,
Yeah.
IP address viewership. It was it was ranging from anywhere from 175 to 300 people. Um, and then the videos that we would then, the service video uploading to YouTube, those have typically been, you know, over the course of time, about 200 people viewing those as well.
Mm.
So,
Wow. That's very cool.
I mean, I did 8 virtual choir things over the fall. Was 2 of those were audio only, because then I put other visual graphics along with what the choir did. But participation in that from the choir um, ended up being anywhere between 25 to 30 people each time.
And your
Uh,
computer could handle that?
yeah, yeah, actually, surprisingly. Plus, when you figure out how to circumvent problems, and like anyone, something goes wrong, and I just Google it and watch a tutorial on YouTube
Right.
to try and make the program work better. And then, realizing, I can just turn these videos off while I'm working on the other ones, kind of thing. Um, but I took the path with all those videos that a lot of people do, which is I edit and master the audio first
Right.
and into a single audio track. And typically, I'll do each section individually, and then I'll combine those 4 tracks into one and create a single track to that, so that I'm only importing one audio track into the video editing software. And then it's just a matter of syncing and lining up people's videos and with the
What program do
words.
you use to do the audio edits?
Audacity.
Okay.
So I went with the free program on that one because
No,
I was already
Audacity's great.
familiar with it too.
Yeah.
I had been using Audacity for a number of years for different miscellaneous things. So
No, Audacity's really great. It's very intuitive too. It's very
yeah,
nice. So tell me more about your experience with the virtual choir thing. How have people responded to that? What kinds of counseling have you had to do with choir members? And also kind of logistically, how does that work? Do you do a click track thing with the accompaniment? Do you do videos of yourself conducting with the accompaniment? Do you give them just audio plus video? Tell me what that
sure.
process looks like.
Um, the initial experience was, yeah, we had a few members step away. They were like,
Yeah.
I just can't do this. I can't even wrap my head around this. Um, and and then there were some who, after their first experience with it, were like, I don't ever want to do this again. I'll come back once we're all singing back in person, and then I respect that.
Right.
And so, out of a of a choir that, of a roster that's maybe 45 people, we're down to about, between 25 and 30 who usually participate with them.
Okay.
We did our first ones in May for Pentecost. So, and I at that prior to doing that, I remember seeing virtual choir videos and thinking that must take a lot of work. And I read about it, and that's the biggest thing people said. You know, it's a lot of work. Oh, so fine. I mean, I'm a rather patient kind of guy, so I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna go for it and learn how to do it. Um, for those first two, there was a person in the choir who was a complete genius with Final Cut. And so she offered to put those two videos together for Pentecost. And it was a great experience. After a month and a half, it was great for the congregation to see the choir's faces, and the response was amazing. So I knew that when we started back up in the fall, I was going to want to do that. So I spent the summer learning how to use Premiere Pro,
Hmm.
and then created a schedule for what was going to happen in the fall. Um, and because that's the biggest thing, is that it takes so much more time and planning than it does to just schedule an anthem to match a theme, where you might spend 20 minutes over the course of a few weeks rehearsing something and then you sing it. This is, yeah, this takes a whole lot longer. So what we end up doing is
Hmm.
I and Susan Carroll will create an accompaniment conductor video guide with her playing the accompaniment, me conducting. I create that into a little video package.
Yeah.
I send that to our section leaders. The section leaders record with that. They get their audio video tracks back to me. I combine their audio only initially, combine their audio with my conducting track. That's
Okay.
what gets sent to the rest of the choir, to the volunteers, so that they're having the opportunity to sing with other voices as opposed to just an accompaniment. We have not utilized the click track yet. There are a couple times where that probably would have been useful and caused a whole lot less headaches in terms of fluctuant tempos.
Mhm.
Um, but that's been the typical format for us, and it seems to work pretty well. And I knew that once people started to get into it, they would be okay with the process. And I was so happy that there were even some, you know, quite senior members of the choir who stuck it out and are faithful in creating their videos and sending them in, and it's great. Um, and the timeline usually is the day that Susan and I record something. That night I put it together and I send it to the section leaders. They have a week to record and get back to me.
Yeah.
I put that together, and then the choir has a week to get theirs back to me, and then I take the next week to put it all together. So it's usually like a 3.5 week process when it's the full choir. There have been a couple times where it was section leaders only,
Mhm.
and that worked just fine as well. So for choir videos, that's that's the process we've used, and it seems to work, and we'll tweak it if we need to. And
Wow, good for you. May I ask the sort of deadly question of what's your estimate of like amount of hours it takes in terms of video editing to do this on your part?
um, it's I would say the stuff that I've had to do this fall, the range has been anywhere from 7 to 15.
Yeah,
And ironically, the 15 was not a difficult piece of music.
really.
It was no, it was something out of the hymnal, and for whatever
Why
reason,
did it take
it
that long?
that was one of those cases where um, there were how when choirs sing hymns, all the old bad habits come out.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Okay.
And it just was not, there wasn't as much concentration as the much more challenging piece that we had done the couple weeks prior.
Mm,
And it was all about timing and having to line things up. And wow, we have not done a hymn since then.
wow. Yeah, I admit that most of the virtual choir anthem things that I have done have I have chosen music uh, with that process in mind of what can most easily snap to a grid and still be musical.
Yeah.
Right? It is a pretty soul sucking process in some ways. It is very musically unredemptive in many ways, and in other ways, I'm kind of grateful for several reasons. One, being able to actually get to know the voices at my disposal, like actually hear them in these very raw forms. And then another, very selfishly, is to be able to EQ my choir.
Oh, sure.
It's kind of cool. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. The one eye-opening thing for me, and this has been both with my work with the choir and also the virtual choir audio only thing I did with Hartford Chorale,
mm,
um, the two choruses from Messiah. Um, what I found was this is definitely a case of um, the whole is much better than the individual sum. I mean, there are singers who may be, you know, 3/4 of the time correct in what they're singing, but when you combine that with other voices, the end result is that you don't hear the imperfections.
right.
Um, and that couldn't have been more true than with the Messiah choruses that I did with Hartford Chorale. I mean, there were 52 singers. It was audio only, but it's still 52 audio tracks to try to put together.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it was very eye-opening because I there's the vulnerability that people have when they record. Um, and certainly they maybe are singing a little different than they would if they were in a room with 120 other people.
Right.
But at the same time, at the basic core, that's their voice.
Right.
But when all the voices are together, it works. And that's eye-opening for me, and something that's important, that I think is important for our choirs to know.
Mm,
For those people who, after their first virtual choir experience, and they had to listen to themselves individually before sending it in, and they felt like, oh my God, I need to retire from singing in the choir because I sound terrible.
mm,
Trying to reassure them that no, this is your voice. And when your voice is a part of all the other voices, just like when we're in person, it's contributing to the whole sound.
that's right.
Not everyone has to be a soloist.
For me, I find that quite inspiring. Actually, there has not been a single singer of mine who has wanted to participate in something like this and not been able to for whatever reason. There are ones that have
Mm,
chosen not to, for
yeah.
example. I assume something similar is the case for you as well. There are ones that have clearly, this is just not my thing. I totally get it. I will respect that decision. Everything is optional. Um, but when presented with the option of choosing something over nothing, they will choose something. And
Yeah.
and even if it's not, yeah, no, none of us signed up for this, right? None of us signed up for this. But they're gonna do so. What I find difficult is the accountability and learning the music, which is really hard because we're really putting it in there. The ball is in their court to learn it in many ways.
I have a thought about that.
But please share.
So one of the things that we started to do in the fall was we started to meet on Zoom every Tuesday night, at our normal Tuesday night rehearsal time. Um, from 7 to 7:30, I would meet with section leaders first to talk about upcoming things, make
Mm-hmm.
sure they were aware of schedule and what things they were going to have to record coming up, etc. 7:30, the full choir. So I let them in from the waiting room on Zoom. Um, we would do some announcements. I would play recordings of upcoming things that we were going to record. Um, then I would share screen, show music on screen so they could see it that way. They would also then have that available to them via email. I would send PDFs of the music to them.
Mhm.
At 8 o'clock, we would use breakout rooms, and the section leaders would go over the individual parts with the choir members, either singing it for them or playing it on a piano and having them all sing along on mute, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and then we'd all come back together for a little closing powwow. Sometimes I would play recordings of past services from the last couple of years just to keep in their mind's ear what we sound like.
Mm.
Um, and that has proved to be really helpful. It also provides professional duties for section leaders.
Right.
And sort of validates, okay, this is why this person is on payroll, because they're
Mhm.
actually doing it. It's a different job than they're usually doing,
Mhm.
but it is their job nonetheless.
Has the church as a whole kind of changed their vision of doing worship and live streaming things since the beginning of the pandemic to now?
Yeah, it's really become a creating a virtual service that is interactive for people at home rather than just a voyeuristic non-participatory thing. Um, and as people become comfortable with the technology that they're using, especially the clergy, etc., and what camera do I look at, and as they're comfortable with that process, I have found that it frees up the creativity side to, okay, well, we're basically creating a TV studio right here on the altar. What do we want that to look like?
Mhm.
We don't have to worry about the rest of the room. It's just like when you're on Zoom, the only thing you're worried about is what's visible on camera, and the rest of the room has boxes, right? Um, so I think that's what we have. That's what we've embraced, and thinking, okay, how can we continue to engage people at home? How can, if there's no bulletin for people to read, I mean, the bulletin that we post on the live stream page of the church that people can download if they want to, it's literally just a bulletin. There's no announcements. It's just an order of service.
Mm.
Um, so it's like, okay, how do we get announcements to people? Well, yes, there are emails that go out from the church. That works for a lot of people, but a lot of people don't read the email.
Yeah.
Um, there are publications that can come out. Great. Sometimes people read those, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
So to try to expand that net of, okay, what's another way that we can put information in people's hands? Um, what we do now is that if the service starts at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, at 8:50 we start the live stream, and we just have scrolling announcements on a PowerPoint of upcoming things,
Yeah.
both immediate and long term. And initially I would put some of those at the end of the service, and so they were sort of happening as closing credits during the postlude.
Mhm.
Um, and then someone else, one of our other clergy said, "Could we put those at the beginning instead of at the end?" I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah.
so that's so that's what we do with that. So that's just another example of, okay, we tried something. Well, let's try it a different way. Um, I'm certainly a person of habit, and so this has sort of pushed me to, okay, I find a comfortable formula to work in. This has pushed me to say, okay, continue to evaluate that and don't just keep doing the same thing.
And
And I
yet,
think,
the profession calls us to constantly be creative. And I have consistently seen
yes.
that in you, Jack. And I'm so inspired by the stuff that you do. And I was about to say, in response to something that you just said earlier, that you and I have had conversations long before the pandemic about the like thinking in terms of also visual aspects of worship service, not just the audio. Because as musicians, we're just like, we think about sounds all the time, but to also really think, as you have experienced in your own video productions of these services, like what will be most engaging to show on screen while the prelude or the postlude happens. And I assume Susan is okay with her postludes being used as now we roll the credits music, but that's how people are interacting with what we're doing, right?
Yes, and like to your last point, I mean, Susan's great.
Yeah.
She was totally cool with all of that. But the feedback we got from congregation was they wanted to be able to see her.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, let's incorporate some more technology.
Yep.
So we have a remote camera set upstairs, and we make sure that the closing credits are not so long that we can't switch to that rolling camera and actually see her playing at the console for at least a third or a half of the postlude. And
Nice.
the response we got from the congregation on that was, "Oh, it was so great to be able to see her." It's like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, we'll
Yeah.
just keep
No, it definitely.
suggesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I've experimented with like pedal cams and then aerial shots of the hands. People love that kind of stuff. It's really kind of fun.
the visual is so important. The visual is so important. Um, I mean that came up in discussions for what we were going to do for Christmas Eve this year. I mean, instead of three in-person services, 4:30, 8, and 11,
Hmm.
um, it was all right. What can we do differently? And so we did something. We did an in-person thing in the parking lot
With the
uh,
animals.
with a live nativity,
Right.
and it was like, all right, well, let's just how do we want to do this? Well, a live nativity could be one of two things. It can be everyone's just in place and people can come by and see it. Great, but that's kind of boring to me. So it's like, all right, how about we place the characters until the tableau is complete, and you put scripture and a Christmas carol between each one,
Mm.
and that's how we created that. And it worked out well. It was socially distant. It engaged our boar's head animals, which was great. Um, Even the camel was awesome. And but then for the evening, none of us right away were really interested in doing a live stream service on Christmas Eve,
Hmm.
like a regular what we do for Sunday morning. We just it was like, well, why don't we do something different? And so even though a lot of other churches have been doing this, we for the first time pre-recorded and did an entire service and premiered it on YouTube.
Mm.
Um, and that worked out really well. I mean, you can see, as you know, you can see how many other people are viewing. You can comment if it's a premiere like that. That was a lot of fun. But from the visual aspect, yeah, it was an entire day of filming
Yeah.
different things. Um, the reason that there were two choir videos for that service, but they were audio only. And the reason is because rather than just seeing the choir singing, which they had been seeing all fall, it's like, I want people to see the sanctuary.
Mm.
Even though there's no one there, the entire sanctuary was decorated for Christmas
Wow.
the way it usually is. So I was showing, I did my own little footage of the sanctuary for one of them. And then the other one was like, well, what would be different? Well, why don't we have dance? So for the James McCrae O Magnum Mysterium that we did, which is a gorgeous little piece that not many people know about,
Hmm.
we had two dancers dance on the chancel with all the Christmas decorations. And so that again, that visual, that multi-art form thing, I just think it's important.
I saw that. I thought it was beautiful with masks on and everything, just dancing. It was
Yeah.
gorgeous.
I am just as busy as I am now pre-pandemic, but it's 80% different work, and most of that is done at home,
Right.
and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the second part of it. I'm happy to, like you said, I'm happy to take off that producer hat at some point
Hmm.
once this is passed. And I'm sure that there will be things that we carry forward. from
Yeah.
what we're doing now, specifically as it has to do with the live stream service and content. That it's never going to go back to just being a voyeuristic. Here's a live service, and here are some camera shots of it.
Hmm.
Um, it will it will undoubtedly still be an interactive with the people at home, um, and that'll be a different, an interesting different, but that's going to require volunteers or part-time people being in that position to help. And one of the things we're doing is we're looking at other churches around the country who are already doing that, who have a AV technology ministry team, and looking at what they do. And yeah, it's a the challenge for any church is that it's an investment of money. You have to have the funds to be able to hire people, whether they're part-time or full-time. You have to have money to have the infrastructure in place. um, so
Yeah.
it's a challenge, but we'll carry stuff forward, and I can't wait to just not make another choir video.
Don't you love it that the default, at least in all the churches that I know, I don't know of any church that has had a situation in which the pandemic happened, all kinds of technology needed to be learned, they had to create virtual services, and it was the pastor who learned how to do it all and take it under their wing. Every single time, at least with the ones that I know about, it has been the director of music.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that is worth noting.
it is absolutely worth
And
noting.
I'm not dissing clergy in any way. I just think it's kind of interesting that that has become the trend. Um,
The religious footnote of the pandemic is what that will be.
but it is a lonely atmosphere to create music in. I think for music directors, but also choir members, right? And yet there is much to be done during this time and much creativity that is happening. Other music directors have come up with super interesting ways of doing like FM transmitter services in parking lots. I have not done that at all. There's some really interesting things that have happened. And for myself, at the risk of getting too personal here, I think I have the devil angel. Maybe they're both devils on either shoulder these days, and one of them is so fixated on quality and result driven and how can I make this as impressive as possible and as good musically as possible and as flashy and brilliant and like pop. And what I've learned is that although that does impress people sometimes to do these three cams shooting in 4K with all the spliced in panned footage and the drone shots and the aerials and like the multiple virtual choirs every week, ultimately what actually connects people is humor and like playfulness and authenticity.
Mhm.
And so it's all of those, and I have not done an outtake role yet, but all of the times when parents, for example, of my choristers are comfortable enough with me to send me their outtakes where the choristers are like singing and they're being very proper and they're holding up their music. And then as soon as they screw something up, then they start smiling and then
Yes.
they actually look at the camera and then they show who they actually are. Or my adults who screw up and like their cameras are all sideways and like they don't know and
Oh
their
yeah.
nose is like right up there and you see like every nose hair on their face. And and then they're laughing about it afterwards like, oh, I really screwed that one up. Like, yes, this is the honest response. This is the honest reality of what we're living in right now. And if we don't address that and honor it, then we're kind of missing that opportunity to just connect and laugh at the
One of
ridiculous.
the most lighthearted moments I had in an editing process was for one of the Christmas Eve video things. Um, I was compiling the section leader audio together, and one of my section leaders sent me two audio tracks. I was like, why did they send me two? Well, one of them was them starting to sing the piece, and then their dog whimpering in the background, and then they proceeded to change the words to the song and talk about their dog for the rest of the song. And I just sat there listening to it, just smiling. And it's like, that combined with one of the outtakes of the ministers doing the Lord's Prayer and suddenly forgetting parts of it and then laughing themselves sick. It was just like, oh, yeah, those are the wonderful moments that all live on my computer somewhere.
I was recording a session for Reformation, and we were doing Built on a Rock. And we were, laid down the organ track, and then my quarantine pod, we were recording the vocals on top. And so we have this kind of weekly routine or bi-weekly routine where we get together, we put up 5 microphones in the living room, and we're all listening on different headphones using one of those ridiculous headphone splitters that splits them 6 ways. And we put up an external screen, and we're watching a video of the hands on the keyboard, and we're like singing along with it. And right before the take, in rapid succession, you could hear a crow outside, and then an exhaustive sigh, and then you begin the piece. So it's ka. Oh, and then a slamming of a hymnal on the bench, and then it began. When I tell you, I lost it. I just couldn't sing. We tried to get the recording of that hymn. Oh gosh, we tried to do it a dozen times, and it gets to a point where it's a combination of like sleep deprivation, right?
Yeah,
And acknowledging how ridiculous all of this is while trying to maintain some austere sort of like professional facade of like, but I'm a professional musician doing this professionally music stuff. um it's just it's just funny. It's just
yeah.
funny and it's real.
I love what you said earlier about what people really appreciate
Mm,
more, and the humor and authenticity. Um, that's if there's anything that people can take away from this, it's like, yeah, as we go eventually back to being in person, um, don't lose that. Don't don't just go back to. I hope no one goes back to the way they were,
mm.
because if they do, they're just not gonna be a part of the rest of it, and it'll be very lonely.
Amen. One of my favorite things to ask people during this time is what they've learned about themselves during the pandemic.
Wow. Um, what have I learned about myself? That even though I've gotten older, I am that I'm still a kid at heart when it comes to new things. Yeah, that's what I would say. And sometimes those new things are learning technology or using technology, um, getting that better microphone and being super excited about it. Um, yeah, that's so maybe that's more of an affirmation, but
Mm.
as you do get older, you're like, wow, am I stuck? Am I just like nothing different? I was like, no, not at all. I continue to be open to new things.
That's a beautiful thing to realize about yourself or to remind yourself of. Hmm. Well, I don't want to keep you too long, Jack, and I know you said you were up till 4 a.m. doing your respective video edits. But I do want to ask you. I don't know who's going to watch these videos. I hope people in the AGO watch them and are encouraged by just kind of seeing what other people are doing and feeling the solidarity in that. But obviously, in our field, there's people who work in churches of all different sizes and with totally different sets of resources. And there's lots of music directors and choral conductors and organists who are feeling um, discouraged, and also some who are feeling really excited about possibilities, um, and some who just have thrown their hands up in many ways, who are just feeling like this is not what we are here to be doing. What what advice do you have, Jack? This is a very broad question, but if you have any advice, would you mind sharing that for whoever happens to be watching this?
Sure. Uh, Obviously, you have to be someone. Someone always has to be true to who they are. And I've been true to who I am throughout this whole process, and that is, I am by nature a very optimistic person. I'm a glass half full person, or it's just a glass, refill it kind of person. You know, but the glass is never half empty for me, and that has influenced my ability to adapt. Um, for people who are having challenges adapting, and that's really the word. It's like you have to adapt, or just fade away. Um, if adapting is really hard for you, push yourself anyway, because in the end, just like with in-person worship, it's not about us.
Mm,
It's about it's about the faith journey of the congregation, and what can we do as musicians to help them in that journey. So it ends up being a very selfless act to not allow yourself to um, stay within your comfort zone.
mm.
Find Realize that your comfort zone is infinite.
And that there is great reward. I
Yeah.
have had people in their 80s in tears with me on the phone when they figured out how to send in their video submission. It's those moments of triumph as
Yeah.
well, and we get to witness them.
Yes.